Paper 3. The assignment for paper 3 is on Blackboard. It looks something like this, but essentially what I'll try to do is I'll summarize it for you so you don't have to just, I'm not going to read it to you. I realize that you can read and you can figure this out, but let's talk about the kind of the complexity of the assignment and essentially how it's going to shake out for you when you start putting pen to paper. What I need you to do is I need you to find a social, political, or legal issue in your field. Okay, so you're gonna, where do you find these things? Well, you find them through, like association websites. So if you're, like the APTA website would have some of these issues on there. The American Medical Association, Chiropractic Association, you're gonna find all sorts of things out there in different places. Read the journals, right? You should be reading your trade journals, whatever field you're going into. You should be reading about what's going on in your field, right? You need to know what professional issues are influencing your profession so that you know how to participate in those conversations when the time comes for you to cast a vote or do something like that. We will talk about various issues. I'll talk about the issues that you want to talk about, and if you don't have anything to talk about, I've got plenty of things to talk about. I've listed possible topics down here at the bottom of the assignment sheet, but probably will need a little bit of explanation in order to get there. But essentially, here's what we need you to do. I need you to find one article. I said one, right? So don't go out and find two. Right? We'll find an article that provides a study. In other words, it has data, right? That they actually run a study in order to address or evaluate the social, political, legal issue that you are discussing or that you find interesting. Now, for example, I'll just scroll down the bottom here and say something like, seatbelt laws, right? Something to that effect. We could essentially, there will be research out there that demonstrates that the enactment of a seatbelt law in a certain state caused death rates to go down. Okay? What you need to do is that you need to provide an intellectual challenge to that article and the data that are being provided. In other words, what I want you to do is I want you to argue against that position. I want you to tell me in your thesis why that article can't make its argument. Now, in the example of seatbelt laws, right? Let's say that somebody goes and studies seatbelt laws. They look at deaths on the highway from, let's say, 1970 till 1990. And then in 1990, they recognized that there was a seatbelt law was enacted, and then they look at the death rate from 1990 to the next, 20 years. So that they're essentially establishing what was the death rate, from 1970 to 1990, what was the death rate from 1990 to 2010, something to that effect. That makes sense, right? And they're essentially saying that in 1990, when the seatbelt law was enacted, this is what was the cause of less fatalities, fewer fatalities in accidents. Can they make that argument? Can they show that causality? Can they show that the seatbelts are what caused fewer people to die? You're shaking your head no. Why not?
There's other, there's other
factors?
Yeah, factors.
Okay. But what kind of factors, and what are they going to do? Other factors that keep people alive, or what?
Like death, we could do like less young drivers if there was like a license change as well, with less people are on the highway with fleets and less deaths.
Okay, I mean, just think about, I want to hear others, right? So that maybe could be a number of people who are, bad drivers or something like that. What else?
Just like medicines and things.
Okay, we can keep people alive who've been injured, maybe.
Winter might not have been as harsh if it was.
There you go. Could have been weather factors that influenced accidents.
Cars become safer.
Cars have become safer. We've got airbags and things right now that we never had before. We've got better restraint systems and those kind of things. Yep. Anything else?
Harsher punishments for driving violations.
Yeah, and also, what about the development of better movement and safety features on highways, wider shoulders, more, wider lanes, number of lanes, that kind of stuff. I mean, think about all the factors that could go into that, right? So essentially what I want you to do is I want you to pick an article that has showing some type of research on a social, political, or legal issue, and I want you to challenge it intellectually, right? Argue about why they can't make their point. Argue about what they're doing in the study that makes the study faulty. And essentially, this is a good exercise in critical analysis, right? You need to look at that and to be able to say, okay, they're saying this. So here's what you're going to do in your introduction. You're going to establish that this article is out there, it's addressing this particular topic, and here's what they're arguing. And then your thesis is going to be, they can't make that argument because they haven't considered certain factors, right? And then your body paragraphs are going to be, I want you to attack the article on, a couple different levels, right? So if you have maybe 2 or 3 major factors that you want to, demonstrate, hey, here's the weakness of the article, here's what they didn't do, and this is the reason why the article is faulty, go ahead and do that in the first phase of your paper, okay? So your first couple of paragraphs, the body paragraphs, are going to be attacking the article for why it can't make its argument. The second half of the paper, then, will be an assessment of what needs to happen in order to provide a valid study on something like this. In other words, I want you to be more conceptual now in the second half of the paper. I don't need you to, to propose a study of 1,000 patients and you divide them up into whatever. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to just think about what could you do to run a study where you can control more of the variables in order to determine whether the seatbelts were the cause of that outcome or not. So you might want to look at the study and you might want to say, okay, they failed to account for this particular issue. So in order to correct that, what could you possibly do? And you're going to find that, what I'm going to be looking for is, are you reasonably proposing something that is going to help us establish a better study? Because if you're going to propose something that is going to be just as faulty, right, I'm going to attack you on your reasoning. So you need to make sure you're thinking it through and understanding that, okay, if I do it this way, am I still going to end up with the same weak results? Probably, you're going to end up with weak results. But what you want to be able to show is that the results I'm going to get are going to be more controlled than at least what's there. Most of you in this room are physical therapists and thinking about that field, and it's one of the hot topics in physical therapy is that direct access argument, right? Last year, Blue Cross Blue Shield New York State decided to release its data on direct access. In other words, what they did is they have obviously millions and millions of claims, and essentially what they were going to show is that those patients who sought physical therapy care under direct access, they're going to be able to show that those patients cost X, and that patients who didn't undergo direct access, right, who went through the referral process, that those patients cost X plus something. In other words, that the cost of receiving care outside of direct access was greater. You understand what I'm saying here, right? Okay. And people are fighting over these data, right? Jockeying for positions, be the first ones to get their hands on those data so that they can write the article, right, that demonstrates that in New York State, under Blue Cross Blue Shield, under those insurance claims, direct access saved people money. What's the problem with the study?
It does say it's like patients who like ran out of like their time at PT treatment, like stayed in longer, and like paid like out of pocket.
Okay, so it doesn't take into account anything that comes from out of pocket. What else is it failing to account for? All they're doing is measuring cost, right? They're looking at the cost of patient care under a direct access model versus the referral model.
It doesn't say if they're getting the treatment they actually need.
Yeah, doesn't say anything about whether the treatment is effective, right? I mean, so what if they undergo treatment with direct access? If they come in and they see the PT for one treatment and then they're out, they're only costing, you know, X amount of dollars, right? But does it demonstrate if the patient doesn't come back or if the patient, you know, is discharged, does it demonstrate that the patient's condition was addressed? No. Doesn't do anything about the quality of care. Doesn't say anything about whether the patient was healed. I could run a study very easily on my Magic Dust Shop, right? And I could say, I'm costing people a whole lot less money, right? If you have low back pain, you come see me, I'm gonna throw magic dust on you, I'm gonna charge you $10, and then I'm gonna kick you out of my office. And I'm gonna write a study that says magic dust is a more effective treatment because it costs the system less money. That's exactly what they're doing, right? Is that reasonable? Right, but people are all throwing parties out there and go, whoa, yeah, we got our hands on this data now, and now we're going to be able to show direct access saves everybody money. I'm over there going, what are you, crazy, right? They sent me, I, for some reason, got involved in the process, right? They sent me these 3 proposals, right? Here's the 3 proposals. Which one are we going to support? Which one do we want to be part of? And I wrote back, none of them. We don't want to be part of that. That's bad science, man. We don't want to attach our names to that. Because it doesn't do anything for us, right? It just makes us look like we're trying to manipulate the research in order to accommodate our political needs. So I want you to look at the research out there in order to determine not only why is it faulty, but I want you to think about what can we do better in order to run a study on this. And well, if we're going to do a study on direct access, how could we possibly run a study in order to get some verifiable data on this? What can we do? When you think about it, just come up with some ideas in your head right now, and let's just talk about it. What can you do to provide a better study on this? What would we want to see? If we're going to find out if direct access is effective, what would we want to see? How would we run a study on that? Yeah.
You could see if people are coming back after the first visit to see if they're actually they need a physical therapist as opposed to another professional.
Okay, whether they're in the right care, right? Whether they have the right provider.
You have reviews from patients of just physical therapy versus patients referred to physical therapy.
Yes, but you got to do something with that though too. Before you go and do that, don't the patients have to have the same condition? If we're going to compare patients between those who went to physical therapy directly versus those who went through a physician referral, wouldn't they have to have the same condition? One of the biggest faults of this direct access thing is that people who go through the referral process probably have a condition that is more complicated and is going to cost more money anyway, right? So to tell me that direct access is saving people money is like telling me that the sky's blue. Unless you have the patients with the exact same condition going through that system, and the patients under the direct access model heal faster and are back to work and become productive members of society faster than those who go through the referral model, then we've got no argument, right? There's no reason to have any more conversations because we can't compare apples to oranges. It would be nonsense to say, oh yeah, this group of patients this group was naturally healthier, got better faster. These people over here who were injured more didn't get better faster. Surprise, surprise. It's not research, it's propaganda. That's what that is, right?
If a patient went to their physician and was diagnosed with whatever, then could they choose to go to physical therapy without their doctor's permission? Because they have a condition that's known?
Right, they have, so there's that limited direct access. In other words, the patient has to have a pre-existing relationship in New York State, right, with a physical therapist in order to go back to that physical therapist. Okay, so there has to be that relationship. It's unlike open direct access, which is in a lot of other states where anybody can walk in with any condition to be treated.
Would you have to limit it to the only, like, a specific age group too when you're looking at this?
Sure, because people with certain conditions are gonna be, the condition's gonna be exacerbated in maybe an elderly population versus a younger population.
And by gender, too.
Yeah, and by gender, and everything, yeah. That's what I'm talking about, right? Think about all the things that you have to control in order to do this. This is what I want you to write about in the second half of the paper. Bring an article in on Monday, and we'll talk about what is being presented, and then we'll kind of tear it apart and talk about, all right, what do we need to do? All right, so we'll help you conceptualize this if you bring an article in on Monday. One of the things about direct access, which I find is really interesting, is that in New York State, you can't participate in direct access unless you have 3 years of experience. I thought you guys were graduating with a doctoral degree. Doesn't that make you experts in the field?
But for like that argument, like I feel almost with like any job, you can go to school for only like and learn as much as you can, but there's
Now, if you have a doctorate, if you're a doctor in something, you're an expert, right? I get a PhD, I can teach at a college. You have a doctoral degree, but you're not allowed to see patients directly? What does that say about that doctoral degree? It doesn't weigh as much as experience does. So now there's a whole argument out there about whether that doctoral degree is a necessary degree, right? Physical therapists used to just have bachelor's degrees. And then it moved to a master's degree. And then they took that master's degree and they just expanded the model over more time and called it a clinical doctorate. To make you a better practitioner? Not according to New York State. So why don't we just go back to the 4-year model and save you guys a bunch of money on tuition? You might want to read up on some of those studies on the DPT. Find out what it means. I'm here to tell you that, you know what? Don't be a sucker, right? Read between the lines and make decisions based on reason. A lot of information floating around out there, but it's up to you to be able to take it in and evaluate it. If at any point in time in our history critical thinking is important, it's now, with information that flies around to the internet and all this crazy stuff, right? I mean, Twitter and Facebook and all this social media crap that's out there where people are just throwing out their ideas and calling it fact. I mean, this is insane, right? The people are buying it because someone's selling it. People aren't thinking at a time when we need to be thinking more. So this is my job, right, is to show you how to think. We need to be able to tear these articles apart. We need to look at the data. We need to look at their methods. We need to figure out where the strengths, where the weaknesses are, and demonstrate whether this is a reasonable argument. Anybody got any ideas of things that they're thinking about? I don't want treatments, right? I'm just talking about social, political, legal issues, right? So if you have any questions about what that is, I mean, you might want to shoot me an email over the weekend if you're looking at something, you don't know if it's a social, political, legal issue or not. We'll talk about it. I find, oh, yeah, do you have a question? One of the things that I find there's a lot of research out there on is that this one, right, the PT-DPT relationship, where they took DPTs and they had patients come in and they evaluated the patients and they compared them against like orthopedists and other people to see if they made the right decision on whether a patient's condition required medical care or whether the patients, were musculoskeletal, essentially where they stay within PT care. Because that's the big problem, right? The problem with direct access, the problem with DPT and all that kind of stuff is that the political positioning on this is dictating that physical therapists get autonomy, right? They become the ones who become entry points into the healthcare field, just like a general practitioner. And so what they're doing is they're trying to argue this out with research and say, all right, if we put a bunch of patients in front of a DPT, right, what kind of decision making do they have? In critical care cases, DPTs were right 79% of the time. In one of the studies, that's probably the one you're going to gravitate toward most readily. Is that good? 79%? I don't know. Not if you're the 21% that's got a critical condition and you don't get diagnosed, I guess, right? You're also being told a lot of information about physician-owned physical therapy services, right? I want to read up on some of those articles. Because the main argument against physician-owned physical therapy services is what?
Doctors are owning physical therapy clinics and then referring their patients essentially to themselves.
Can you tell a patient where to go? Can you tell a patient what service they need to go? No, it's against the law. Okay, let's start there on that one. So you can't tell someone where to go. So the main concern is that, oh, there's an ethics problem here, that the patient might go and be under the care of a practice that's under a physician's supervision. What's the problem with that? Wouldn't you want your physician to be working with your physical therapist closely so that there's a continuity of care across those two disciplines? Yeah, I don't see the problem in that. I would hope that my physician is talking to my physical therapist. I hope my physician wants to walk in while I'm under care and find out how I'm doing. I'm thinking great. Is there an ethical violation to that, though? If you think about it, just where's the ethical violation? It's not in the referral process because we can't tell people where to go. Where's the ethical problem going to be?
They're receiving money for it. It's like they're owning, if they own the physical therapy clinic and they're getting a portion of the services that the physical therapist is providing in order to like get as a patient, because if you're like an individually owned therapist, the therapist can communicate with an orthopedic doctor or a specialist or something on the phone and discuss the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an ethical problem, though. I mean, people who own practices make money. I mean, that's not an ethical problem. Where's the ethics problem?
Patients who are sent out, they don't have the same, their physical therapists are on the same time position.
That's not an ethical problem, though. How is that an ethical problem? Where's the ethics violation in this? What could happen? What could possibly happen if the physician owns a physical therapy practice?
It might become biased and like not see that the patient should actually be referred to another specialty.
Yeah, or if you might want to say, you know what, you need more care, Mrs. Jones. You have to come back next week too, right? And bill further, right? Because you know that money that Mrs. Jones is going to be making is going to be in your pocket, right? So you might want to extend care. You could justify it, right? Which would lead to people to say, well, our physician's doing the right thing here. that what you were gonna say?
What about like, if like you don't know who's improving the patient's results, like who would the patient sue the doctor, the PT? Would that be an issue? Like,
Who's making the final discharge decision, you mean?
yeah.
Okay, so if the argument about ethics is being charged toward physicians, how is that any different than a direct access environment? Wouldn't direct access lead to the same ethics violation of you being able to keep patients around and keep patients coming back and tell patients that they're not, ready to be discharged? Shake your heads yes, right? Because that's exactly what it is, right? So now you, in arguing against physician-owned physical therapy services, have just contradicted yourselves by arguing for direct access. You don't like that argument?
No, I'm just like thinking.
Because if you want patients to come in without physician referral or to continually come to care, well, then you can be just as guilty of violating that ethical standard, right? Yep. Can't have your cake and eat it too, right? That's what I'm saying. We'll have lots of fun with this. Because there's no right or wrong response to this. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is, just looking at the arguments, looking at the field, and trying to figure out who's got a reasoned argument about this. I do want you to avoid arguments about belief systems, things like euthanasia, abortion, and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, don't try to argue that, we shouldn't kill people. Yeah, no kidding. Okay. So there's a lot of other issues, right? I've just thrown out some other ones here, just some things that have made headlines over the last couple of years. All right, if you want to address some of these things, feel free. What are you scowling at?
I'm trying to read it.
That's my face.
I like this one, the dress codes and graduate programs stuff. You like that one too? Yeah. Any research on dress codes and student performance? Sure is. Lots of research out there. Schools that have dress codes tend to perform higher. Right? Can they make that argument? Think about the variability of that. If you're telling me the students perform higher because they're dressing in a certain way, can you make that argument reasonably? No, why not? You're scoffing at this.
There's a lot of different variables, like what kind of education they're in.
That's right.
How great their teachers are.
Do you realize that in education, I mean, of all the research that's ever been done on educational programs and everything that's ever been written out there and ever been researched, there's only one factor that's corresponded with student success. In other words, if we want to find out if a student is going to be successful in college and eventually in life, do you know what the one factor is that is correlated across time in research?
Your interest in
What's that?
The interest in
Nope.
the subject?
Got nothing to do with that.
Their family support?
Kind of. Money, parent wealth. It's the only factor. Doesn't matter what school you go to, doesn't matter what curriculum you study, doesn't matter what kind of, dress code you're in or anything like that. Nothing's ever is corresponded more closely than parent wealth. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so you've got some work to do between now and Monday. Come to class prepared to talk about some of these social political issues. These are fun, right? This is an easy paper to write. You're dealing with one article and you're just attacking it in the first half of the paper, but then the critical part of the paper is the second phase, which is what would we do in order to study this subject? How can we conduct a study? What would we need to control? How would we go about doing it? Any questions, any comments, any concerns about paper number 3? What you need to be doing? Yes?
You said an article that kind of include the studies.
Yeah, it's gotta have research in it. It can't just be an opinion piece. It can't just be a philosophical piece. It's gotta be something that actually conducts a study so you can look at the data and say, they didn't control for this.
Okay, but you don't want us to go looking for actual studies. You want like an article with
No,
an
I want you-
argument that includes a study.
So, but you just go out there, and if you're interested, let's say physician-owned physical therapy services, go out there and find a research article on physician-owned physical therapy services. Somebody who conducts a study on that to determine that there was ethical violations or something like that. You know what they're gonna do? They're gonna show in the POPTS environment, the research out there shows that in the POPTS that the cost of care went up with those physicians who owned their own physical therapy clinics and services. That's the argument. Why is that a faulty argument? Because we don't know the patient's condition, right? If we don't know the patient's condition, we can't determine what the cost of care should have been. Unreasonable argument. But yet people out there waving the flag, oh, these physicians are all unethical, they're ripping off the system, they're costing us all money. Yeah, right. Like a physician's gonna put his medical license on the line for the $25 copay in a physical therapy service. That makes sense. I'm no longer gonna be able to practice medicine, my livelihood, because I'm gonna try to rip off the system for $25? Oh, foolish argument. Right? Doesn't make any sense. There was a question over here, somebody had a question? I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, right? Come prepared to tell me I'm crazy and tell me, you know, my argument's wrong. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to argue with you. Okay. For the rest of today's class, I would like to now spend time working through the papers from paper number 3, right? And as I said before, right, we talked about certain things in class on Wednesday. I just want to make sure those things are being represented. At this point in time, you know, if you want to read your own paper or read through somebody else's paper or something that's changed, it's probably a good idea to read someone else's just because you need that fresh perspective on things. I mean, if the paper is conceptually off track, you know, if it goes through like long summaries of the study and things I told you not to do and that kind of stuff, there's nothing you can do to save that paper at this point, right? So, you know, just focus on something else, right? Maybe, you know, have a conversation with that student and just say, you know, look, you're not listening. What you can do in this short period of time today is probably read for maybe some of those major grammatical errors, right? Making sure that there's, you know, the rules of punctuation are being, you know, followed. Maybe, you know, address some of the weak language that might be in there. I'm not expecting to be perfect on this. I'm just expecting to make progress. Ask questions. I'm here to answer your questions, but at the end of class, whenever that is, a few minutes, half an hour from now or whatever, papers will be due, and then I'll try to get these back to you probably by Wednesday of next week, right? I'll spend the weekend with them, but I'll probably, you know, I think we got 75 students in this class. It takes me a while to read off the things. So probably have it back to you on Wednesday. All right, let's get to work.